Thank you for joining me for another episode of Think Your Way to an Epic Life. Our guest today, Eva Moon, is an internationally produced playwright. She's a screenwriter. She's a performer, a songwriter, and she's a published author. Her book about Pinocchio as an adult, as a human, really cool. And it ties into PTSD and post-traumatic growth afterwards. She's very real about the struggles she's been through. I think you'll find this a wonderful podcast. Please share it with your friends. Thank you so much. So, Eva, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm really pleased to be here.
It is good to have you. So one of the things that you talk about a lot is PTSD. Can you kind of tell me where your interest in that comes from?
Yes, I can. It's not actually PTSD. I mean, that's what gets all of the attention is, post-traumatic stress. It's a very real thing. There's plenty of people out there who are just grievously affected by post-traumatic stress disorder. But there's another side. There's a flip side to everything. And the flip side to post-traumatic stress disorder is post-traumatic growth. And I try to bring more attention to the phenomenon that many people who go through traumatic experiences experience growth afterwards. They've come through it. They've survived. They may be damaged in grievous ways, but they've learned things. They understand that life is limited, and for that reason, it's more precious. And they come through it maybe with a greater sense of purpose, a mission to help other people who are facing the things that they face, or to spend more time on meaningful activities and with meaningful relationships. And it's hard to predict. You don't really know until you get there. But I think that, if you go into a traumatic experience or traumatic phase in your life with the only scenario that you've been exposed to is that this is going to damage you and you're going to have screaming nightmares and, you'll never be happy again. It makes it worse. It can, in some cases, I believe, become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas if you also know that there are people who come through traumatic experiences and find themselves uplifted and stronger and happier than they were before, even with all the changes and the losses, that would maybe create another mindset of possibility that they would that might happen to them too. And there's things that you can do to kind of tilt things in your favor, and we can talk about that as we go along.
Well, I think we should talk about that just right about now, because it is true, and people do know that. I love this saying: if you're going through hell, keep going. Keep going. Get out of it, keep going, get past it, because on the other side is usually a lot of beauty. So what are some things people can do to nudge it that way?
Well, I have this story I like to tell, and this is not an original story with me, but when I heard it, it resonated with me so strongly that I tell basically everybody I meet. So you're walking down a hallway with a cup of coffee in your hand, this very full cup. And somebody walking the other way bumps you and jostles you, and your coffee spills. And if I asked you, why did you spill your coffee, what would you say?
Because I got bumped.
You might say that, but what if you looked at it this way? You spilled coffee because there was coffee in your cup. If there had been tea in your cup, you would have spilled tea. And the lesson of this is that whatever you have filled your cup with, that's what's going to come out when life jostles you, when you get bumped. And everybody's going to get jostled and bumped in the course of their lives. So you can fake being a healthy, whole, and happy person until the house of cards comes tumbling down. And it's at that moment when the things that you've filled your cup with can help you or make life difficult for yourself. So what I like to say to people who are, in a calmer stage of life where life hasn't yet or hasn't recently jostled them, is be mindful of what you're filling your cup with. If someone cuts you off in traffic, you can get furious and flip them off and swear at them, but it's not going to make them a better person or a better driver, and it's just going to fill your cup with anger and impatience. And and try to balance your, the things that are coming into your life. I know we have a lot of very upsetting news going on all the time, but balance that. And you have to pay attention to that sort of thing to a certain extent, but you can balance it with time spent with friends and family, or enjoying things that are your favorite things. Whether it's humor, music, or running, or dancing, or knitting, or what are the things that bring you peace and bring you joy. Those are things that you can balance out the bad things in your cup with, so that when life does bump you, you've got some resources to draw on.
I love that. If you bump me, if you squeeze me, you're going to only get what's inside of me. If you squeeze a lemon, you get lemon juice.
Right, exactly.
Right. So in order to prevent PTSD in the future, we fill ourselves up with a lot of good now.
Yeah, and I think that you fill yourself with things that make you feel whole and content, and try to surround yourself with friends and people who lift you up rather than bring you down. I think there was a study done when I was looking into resilience with children who have been traumatized, and if they had one person in their lives, in their early lives, who supported them and believed in them, they had a significantly higher chance of being resilient in a traumatic situation. So this is something that anyone can do, is hang out with people who lift you up, and avoid the company of people who bring you down. And I know it's not always possible. I spent several years caring for my father with dementia. He passed away last December, and and I couldn't avoid that, obviously. And sometimes people have situations where they can't avoid you have to bring home a paycheck. You may have but you can balance it. There's ways to balance things. This is what I hope people will find.
Very fun. So I'm curious, did your dad have a good sense of humor as well?
He did. My sense of humor, I think, comes more from my mother. He was a fun guy. He was always just there for me. And it's only since he's been gone that I've started really thinking back and remembering things about my dad that remind me of myself. And so, they weren't really things that I could share with him towards the end of his life, because he was incapable of understanding it. But he was a huge influence, and a lot of what I am today is because of his quiet support. Even if he didn't understand what I was doing, he was on my side.
Well, that's very cool to have anyone on your side, but especially a parental figure people take that so for granted. The people who have that don't have a clue that you need to go kiss your mama on the cheek right now. You need to go shake your daddy's hand and give him a hug, whatever, because it's not, you just expect it because you've always had it, but it's not normal. And so, yeah, parents are very, very influential.
And friends are too. I mean, we have families of choice.
Yes.
And I think that we're having a complete epidemic of loneliness in this country. I was just talking to a young woman yesterday who was, she's in her mid to early 20s. And she was telling me how that she finds it so hard to make friends. And I think the pandemic, especially for young people, I think really short-circuited a time in their lives when that was the major work of your life, is finding your people, finding your tribe, and bonding with them. And now these young people have come out of the lockdowns and the isolation and the Zoom everything. And well, how do I make a connection with people who are going to be my people? And they're struggling with that. And I think it's one of my missions is to help foster communities and interest in bringing people together, where they might find that connection that they may not have from their family, or they may not have it through work or through school, but they might find it through something else. This woman I talked to yesterday, she remembered that she likes to run, so she's going to go out and join a running club and see if she can meet people that way.
We were already in deep, deep trouble in this arena before COVID happened. There was a professor who called two students up onto the stage, put two chairs, they faced each other, and said, talk to each other for 5 minutes. And they could not do it. Then he took the chairs and he backed them back to back, and he said, text each other. They texted the entire 5 minutes, no problem. And that was before COVID. And now, oh my gosh, you're right. There is an actual loneliness epidemic. And you want to find other ways to get people together. What are some of your thoughts on that?
This is something I've been thinking about. I'm looking for more ways right now, and I'm working on it myself. When you meet people, I think one of the things that people forget is that you don't have to think of things to say. All you have to do is ask questions. And if you ask, especially open-ended questions, like instead of where are you from, say, well, what was the craziest thing that happened in your hometown? Or, something where they can tell a story. You want to invite people to tell stories. The things that I do to foster community where I live, about 2 years before the pandemic, I went to my city council here in Redmond, Washington, and proposed a monthly sing-along. And they backed it, and they still do. I ran it on Zoom all through the pandemic, and now we're back to, it's tonight, actually. We're meeting in a park, and people come from all over, and they bring their instruments, their ukuleles or their guitars or their banjos, and I, provide the songs and the chords, and we strum and we sing for an hour and a half once a month. And I also lead a music jam that happens in parks every Sunday afternoon. And I started a writers group. Since I write. I'm a social extrovert, and that makes it easy for me to. I know it's harder for introverts, but even for the introverts, as writers, we get together at a coffee house every Tuesday and write. Just sit and write at the same table. We don't, have to talk to each other, but just to be there in community with each other. We've been doing this so long that I invited them all. There were like 9 of us. They came over last night, and we had a potluck dinner. And then I lit a big fire in the fire pit in my backyard, and we sat around and read stories to each other for the whole evening. It was incredible, and and these were people who were just like sitting at home and writing. So I'm always looking for more ideas for ways to foster community and foster connection. Do you know about blue zones?
Yes.
Have you? Yeah. People talk about, well, you need a plant-based diet and you need to do this, but the foundation of the blue zones is social.
Mm-hmm. So the blue zones for the listeners is areas that are very concentrated with centenarians, people who are 100 years old or older, and then they interview them and they test them physically and they figure out, how do you get to be older and still these people are getting up from the ground. They're 100 years old and they sit on the floor. They don't have couches and chairs like we do, and that's part of the problem. But yeah, very cool. Really, I mean that with all my heart. I mean, you said that very lightly, that it's easy for me because I'm an extrovert. However, what you're doing is you're saving introverts' lives, or at least the quality of their life at bare minimum, because they're not getting out and they need it desperately. I mean, people are so hungry. I'm in real estate and we do client events. And before COVID, it was like pulling teeth to get someone to come. I mean, we would take them bowling and do all these things and spend this money on them, and nobody ever wanted to come. Now, oh my gosh, I can't, they all want to come because people are hungry for it now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Super cool. Wow. Okay. So we got to talk about Pinocchio.
Yes, we have to talk about Pinocchio.
Yeah. Why Pinocchio? You wrote a book and it is called
Pinocchio's Guide to the End of the World. And it's Pinocchio's adventures after he became a human and grew up. And it's set in Europe in the years between the world wars during the rise of fascism, which gives lots of opportunities for great adventures. It's got humor and excitement and sorrow and all the things. But what drove me to write the book was something much more personal. Some years ago, I discovered I carry a genetic mutation called BRCA1, and it gave me an 87% chance of breast cancer and a 55% chance of ovarian cancer. And my mother at the time had terminal cancer for the same mutation. She passed the mutation to me, which is how I learned that I had it. And I chose to have a preventive hysterectomy and double mastectomy, which happened in the space of 3 months while I was also trying to help care for my mom. And that was my big traumatic experience the last decade. And my way of trying to make sense of random things that happen, because there's no sense behind something like this. There's no one to blame. It's just something that happened, but we try to understand what it means and how it affects us and how we can cope with it. And so my method is through stories. The first thing I wrote was a one-woman musical, sort of a musical comedy called The Mutant Diaries, Unzipping My Jeans, which is the story of everything that I went through with this big transition in my life. And I performed it across the U.S. and a couple times in the U.K. And it's streaming on Amazon Video on Demand if people want to watch it.
We do. What is it called?
It's called The Mutant Diaries, Unzipping My Jeans.
Okay. Thank you.
And but then after that, I was still struggling. And the thing that I was struggling with was sort of a disconnect between how I felt on the inside and how I felt on the outside. I felt like I had gone through some physical changes. My body wasn't the same. And it happened very suddenly. Our bodies change all the time, don't they? I mean, I'm not the same person I was when I was 15. And so I had I go, well, who am I now? How many things can you remove before you're not yourself anymore? And how do you reconcile all that? And I don't know how it first started, but I started thinking about Pinocchio, because here is this wooden boy who, and the blue fairy comes along and waves her magic wand, and he's suddenly human. And we all assume that it was just happily ever after it. He just said, okay, I'm human now. Everything's fine, and I don't have any after effects from that. And all his was desired and mine was not desired. I think we're not very good predictors of the things that are going to make us happy in the future. And I started wondering, what would Pinocchio really feel about this transition? Because I felt the same on the inside as I always did. There was no, like I was this person before, and now I'm this other person internally. And wouldn't Pinocchio feel the same way? Wouldn't he feel, like he's walking around with, skin and bones and flesh and everything, but inside he knows he still feels like the same person, because we do feel like the same person inside. And I went, well, how did that affect him? Yeah, growing up, did he have imposter syndrome, feeling like he's walking around, people are looking at him and assuming he's just like them, and he knows he's not. He's more closely related to the chair you're sitting on than the person sitting next to him. And that's kind of what drove me to write the book. It's a fun adventure story, but through it all, on his real quest is to find his authentic self and reconcile the inside and the outside, and figure out how to be himself in the world in a true and authentic way, and accept that he is himself, and that it's okay. And of course he's Pinocchio. I mean, he goes off the deep end, a lot, and he's impulsive, and but he struggles, and I struggled, and it was through writing about his struggles and his, and I don't want to give away his realization, but he does come to, acceptance and not just acceptance, but, the belief that the sum of his parts now is greater than it could have been if he'd been one or the other. That because of all these things that in his history, that he is the best him that he could possibly be. So and I hope that that's something that people take from the book, even if he's out there punching Nazis. That we have lots of expectations of things that our bodies are going to do for us. We think that they're going to make us happy and make us lovable, and maybe we expect too much of our bodies, and that's okay. That that we can kind of settle down a little bit. So that's kind of why I wrote the book, but it was a lot of fun too. I mean, it was a lot of work. I had to work through all this, but now it's in the past, and I've done that. Now I'm moving on to other things.
Well, yeah, but it's still your baby. That's. I know you'd also written a short story and had that published as well. However, this one seems so much more intimate. And did you ever have times when you just couldn't make yourself write?
Oh, all the time. I hate writing. I love having written, but I sort of subscribe to my belief about my feeling about writing is it's sort of like the movie Alien, where I have to write the stories that are chewing their way out of my chest.
Right. Okay.
And I don't really have a choice about it. So it's not that I set out to say I'm going to have a career as a writer. No way. I just want to, have these books and stories and films and plays and things out there. By magic. Yeah, that would be fine.
Oh gosh. Okay. So what tips or tricks would you give someone who's an aspiring writer?
It's a little difficult because, I'm very fortunate that, I'm married to a good guy, and I'm not dependent on my writing to put dinner on the table, because it's a very hard thing to do. So if someone wants to be a writer, no one should be a writer unless there's just no other option, that they have to write. You have to have the stories that need to be told. And I know that there's whole conferences you can go to now for, how to make $1 million, or how to be a New York Times bestseller. Just follow this formula and just do all these things, and you're going to be a best-selling author. And I think that they're feeding on hopes and dreams of people. I was in screenwriting school for several years, and there's a whole industry feeding off the dreams of screenwriters, saying, just do this, do that, write, analyze the market and write to the market, and then, you'll be a big star. And I don't think that that's the path. I think that you have to write your truth. And I won't say that it's easier. That is a guarantee of success, but it will be much more meaningful than just trying to force yourself to write the next thing that you think is going to sell, when it's not the thing that's in your heart to write.
I think that just comes with, I don't want to say age, because there are people who age out and don't really seem to gain wisdom, but I think that comes with wisdom of, I want to do what I really want to do. You need to be in, Gay Hendricks, he wrote The Big Leap, and then he wrote The Genius Zone. And he talks about that, being in your genius zone. When you're in your genius zone, it's effortless and it feels good and it's right. And instead of forcing yourself to do what you think you should do, and we all have to do that sometimes. I mean, I don't respect someone who won't go flip burgers if they need to feed their family. You do whatever you need to do for the time until you can make it better. But when you can make it better, that should be the goal, is to do what you want to do, what you love to do. It sounds like you're doing that at a very high level.
Thank you. I'm really fortunate. I mean, I lead a very privileged life, and I understand that I'm fortunate that my children are grown and out of the house, and we have enough money to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table, even if I wasn't selling books. So, and I know that's not everybody's story, and I don't want to pretend like anyone could just like go out there and tell their truth and expect to be an overnight success. But I think that if you're going to be an artist of any kind, that authenticity shows, and calculation, market calculation, that shows too.
I think authenticity is the most attractive thing in a person, period. Like, that is what everyone desires, is someone who is just real. And it's just so beautiful to see. With exceptions,
I mean, there's probably some very authentic serial killers out there.
There was the exception. I knew you would go there. I know. Right. Okay. So, is there anything that I have not asked you that I should have asked you?
Gosh, we've talked about some good stuff.
Feels that way.
You could ask me what I'm working on next.
That would be very interesting. What are you working on next?
I'm writing my next book, and it's another one that's chewing its way through my chest. I mentioned before that my father passed away from dementia in December, and I had this story that had been kind of percolating for years in the back of my head about a mother-daughter road trip. And when my father passed away, this kind of rose up in me as a way of processing how I felt about, both of my parents are gone now, and my dad is gone, and how do I, because for months after he passed away, I felt mostly numb. I didn't know what I felt. And it's only through the process of writing this book, which is, it's going to be a comedy. It's sort of an updated Don Quixote, but with a former hippie woman who's with dementia, who's needs to be driven from Minneapolis to the West Coast, and the crazy adventures that they have along the way. But as I'm writing it, I'm sort of uncovering memories of, as I'm writing the about the childhoods and the lives of my characters in the book, I'm sort of, these things from my own past are bubbling up, and I know that at some point I'm going to strike an emotional vein that needs to be struck. So that hasn't happened yet, but I think it will.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to reading both books.
Thank you.
And
It's going to be a while for this one.
Okay. That's okay. I'm not going anywhere. I'm an avid reader. I love to read. So thank you so much for all the joy that you bring to the world and everything that you do. It matters. And for anyone who does not think that making one person's day better doesn't matter, I would love to debate that with you at any time, any place, because every single person that you can make their day better, then they're putting it out to everyone else. So I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.